right, so let's get started talking about the Common Application tonight. Thanks so much for joining me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen now. We're going to get over to the Common Application. If you haven't already made your account, that's definitely something I want you to do this evening. And then that way, when you start looking at the certain screens I'm about to show, it will make sense to you. All right, so we're in my practice account for the Common Application. This is the screen. This is what your student or your account should look like when you log in. A couple kind of what I wanted to go over tonight was kind of some main things that tend to come up with students when they're doing the Common Application. But of course, if you have specific questions, please make sure to put it in the Q&A box so that I can answer that for you. So obviously, the thing I'm going to start with is kind of this tab, the Common App tab, or what I call the Profile tab. All of these sections here, profile, family, education, testing, activities, and writing, and then possibly courses and grades. This is the section that goes to all the colleges that you're applying to through the Common Application. So this will end up being the piece that is non-specific. It goes to University of Michigan. It would also go to Boulder. It would also go to Oregon if you're applying to, say, those three colleges. Couple things with the profile section. It seems very straightforward because this is kind of the basic information part. But please make sure that you do put in your legal first name. This is the name that is when they are matching up things like your your FAFSA, your transcript, your test scores. Please make sure that that name is the same, or else it actually makes it very difficult for them to make sure to sync those up together. So again, go through it slowly. This section tends to have students that go through it really quickly, but then, I would go through it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure your address is correct, contact details are correct, all that kind of thing. Okay. Let's see. The next part that tends to come up with some questions is in the education part. So obviously you put in your high school information here, when you started, when you graduated, things like that. The current or most recent year courses. So this would be your grade 12 classes. Please know that if you do change your courses, after you submit this, you do have to notify your colleges. So, if you're kind of waiting to see this year, if you might stay in a class or two, you might want to wait to submit an application if you think this class list might change. Part of the decision making about whether or not to accept you is based on what you report here. So if you go ahead and report, let's say this one's 4 classes. If I report 4 APs and I decide to drop one of them, I do then have to let those colleges know if I've dropped one of those courses or not. So, just be, try to be as clear as possible, whatever classes you put in here, that these are the classes you intend to stay in for the full year. Okay. So honors. This section, I have a lot of students that get confused. These are awards that are related, as it says, academic achievements. So if you're an athlete and you have received, most valuable forward or athlete of the year, that doesn't go in here. This would purely be like Dean's List, honor roll, AP scholar or of recognition, things like that. That is what will go in here. So please make sure if you've won a science award or been named to an all academic team in your region, that is what's going to go in here. Okay. And that's where you get things like, was it just a school specific award? Was it a state one, a national, or an international one? Okay. And then future plans. This is purely just to get a sense of like, are there any future plans? There is no part of this where students, they're going to hold you to, okay, you said you're going to have a PhD here and that's not what you're going to do. It's mostly to just get a sense of, do you have any, plans in the future? Okay. All right. And then in testing, so I get this question all the time because obviously there are schools that are test optional. So you could, for example, let's say your scores are strong enough for Oregon, but not strong enough for Michigan. You could fill out this section reporting your SAT or ACT scores and, submit that. and then come back in here and take those out before you submit Michigan. So you can change this up. This is only the self-reporting section. If you do, for example, apply to Oregon with the test, you do still have to go into SAT or ACT's portal and send those officially. So just because you report it here doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get the official score. That's a separate step you have to do. Okay. And then lastly, when it comes to testing, if you're going to submit AP subject test scores, know that you need a report. It says here, the tests you've taken or expect to take. So if you're a senior and you took 2 APs last year and you have 2 more coming this school year, so in 2024, you are going to go ahead and say you've got 4 tests to report. So let's pretend. So I have a stats, let's say I got a 5. And then I'm going to do another one from last year. I don't know, I'm going to do art history. I got a 4, but I already know I'm going to have ones in 2024, right? It's always going to be in May, but I know I'm going to have a biology one and I can leave this blank. I don't have a score yet. And then I have another one coming up in May in computer science, and I don't have a score. And then I'm going to hit continue. That is to let a college know that that you are intending to take that test, and you may or may not send a score. But it is good to let a college know that is something that you are planning to do. This is probably the section that gets the most concern, right? So it's the activity section. It does allow you to add up to 10 activities. Something I really advise, there's this button at the top called preview. This allows you to see what the college is going to look and see it as. Okay, so it's helpful for like a formatting standpoint and just kind of seeing how it's going to be. So for example, this student kind of made up some stuff here, but this is how it gets read, and that's why it is important to kind of list everything you can. So let's take a look at that first one. This student, we said he was an assistant manager at a tennis shop. And we might actually want to, write in what that is, right? So we might say like, Foothills tennis shop. Like, we don't just want to say tennis shop. We actually want it to have something specific. And obviously we don't just want to say sell stuff. We want to say a little bit beefier. We want it to have a little more explanation about the duties. So responsible for customer service, handling court rentals, childcare for members, cleaning as needed. As you can tell here, it does not need to be full sentences. It can just be kind of phrases of the things that you do, but give yourself the credit of everything you've had to handle in this, for example, in this role. The grades that you participated in. If you did something, say the summer before 9th grade, I would still select that as a 9th grade activity. If it's something you plan to do 12th grade or after you graduate, then you would also click the postgraduate button as well. Hours spent per week, and then weeks spent per year. So this is definitely, some students are going to say, oh, I don't really know because, I didn't actually keep records, and some weeks I worked more and some weeks I worked less. So this is on average, how many weeks did you spend? So this was someone's summer job. So it's a little bit more clear. They worked a 40-hour week and they only did it for 12 weeks in the summer. So that's where you see it here. And this is something that they would do in the summer. Now, if we're talking about a rugby team, right? So we'll kind of go through it together here. This student, let's just say they played for their high school rugby team, okay? And then you actually have to explain a little bit. They were the captain. If they weren't the captain, you can just say member. You don't have to get crazy with that because I know a lot of students aren't quite sure how to explain it. But, if you were the captain, if you were the vice president, stuff like that, like a title is really helpful for a college to understand what exactly you're going through, okay? And then here it's like, describe this activity. Now, if you didn't really do anything, you're just a member, you can just say participated in high school rugby team, competed against local high schools. that would be fine. For this one, you know, if it was like a selection team, like an all-star team, you could say, you know, like this, selected for 50 as 15 players, made it to the finals, won the championship, something like that. So you do want to, you know, make sure you're including, you know, it's asking here, things that you accomplished or recognition. So if you were most improved, most valuable back, things like that, that would get put in here as well. Okay. So the hours spent per week. So this student, let's say they played for a club team. They had practices twice a week, and they had games on Saturdays. They went to tournaments. So some students might off the bat say, okay, well, I did 2 days a week. Each practice was 2 hours. So that's 4. And then I had a game that lasted 2 hours. So maybe they would say 6. And then let's say they did this for 8 weeks. I would actually push the student to ask, if you had practices twice a week, did you have to get there, you know, did you just show up and then you're at practice, or did you have to commute? Did you have to get there half an hour early to get your cleats on, to get tape, to do all that stuff? Afterwards, did you normally stay to break down the practice field, or did you have to go set up game fields or anything like that? So after we start taking into account how much time it's actually taking you to be a part of this team, it might end up looking like 12, or it might look like 15 if we're thinking about like all the time you're dedicating to rugby. You're not then spending time with your studies and reading and all that kind of stuff. So that's what we're trying to figure out with the activities descriptions here, and how much time you're spending is just kind of figuring out, how is this one student getting the GPA that they have in the classes they have, with how much time do they have available to themselves during the week? Okay, so just make sure you give yourself credit for how much time it takes for you to do that particular activity. Now, this student, if they put in, say, their rugby club team, but they also play on a high school team, that would be a separate activity. If you then play on an all-star team, that's a separate activity as well. So don't just put rugby and try to include all of the description into one activity. You can break it apart. Okay, so make sure you give yourself, again, you know, some leeway there to include every single one of the activities that you do. Here's another one that some students might overlook. And these are activities that you do that are maybe not organized or part of a team or an organization. So this student, you know, loves to mountain bike, and they go every single week. They'd love to just go mountain biking. So they might just say mountain biking here, right? And then if they do this, they go ahead, they're a recreational mountain biker. They go 3 hours per week. That's just something they love to do. And they go 40 weeks per year. So this is just helpful from a college perspective of, oh, this is something that this student loves to do. They love to spend their time doing it. So think through, once you've gotten through kind of the typical activities of clubs at school, teams, things like that, volunteering, jobs, you might have something like this that would get added to your application. Things that are not kind of typical, I would add that in there, okay? Any questions about this, about activities? So it does allow you to do up to 10. You don't have to have 10, but obviously if you are able to do that, that's good. I would also point out that in these sections, let's say that this rugby team was really important to me, I might use these arrows here to move it up and prioritize it. This is something I really want the college to know, that this is, see, it says in order of their importance to you. So if rugby is really important, I might want to move it up. But if I felt like my job was really important, I worked that 40 hours a week, you know, and it was a really big part of who I am, I might move that one up as well. Okay, or some things get moved down. So it is kind of in order of what you feel like is important to you. Okay. Now, if you go over, if you say, look, I filled this whole thing out, I still got 3 more activities that I want them to know about, there is a place that you would put it. Okay, so what I would do is then I would go to writing, and I'm going to go ahead and click on additional info. Okay, so additional info can be used for multiple reasons, right? So number one, you can explain, obviously there's a question about like, the pandemic and whether or not that affected you. Or you can also use this to include anything else. So for example, let's say you got a concussion freshman year that prevented you from going to school for 3 weeks and it really affected your grades. That is something you could put here. Just factual, right? Grade 9, or you would say like at the start of grade 9, I had a concussion, et cetera, et cetera. You want to explain what it was, how it affected you, and how you came out of it. So with proper therapy, I was able to be cleared and now I'm okay. But it did affect your grades, right? So you might want to have a little description there. And then you could also include additional activities. Okay. And then you want to kind of describe it the same way that it was in the activity section. So here, let's say you wanted to, add hiking, right? Or you are an avid, beekeeper. And I say this because my husband started doing bees and we got our first thing of honey today. So that was very exciting, but he spent a lot of time doing that, right? So if he was a high school student, I would say you have to put beekeeping in here because that's something that you're passionate about. You spend time doing it every week, every day. You want to make sure you put it in there. So again, if you're over the kind of 10 activities they provide for you in the activity section, you can definitely use this additional information section to go ahead and explain any reason something happened that might have affected your grades, and then also any other activities that you ran out of room. Okay, so once we are through kind of this main Common App tab, you see how there's a green check mark here. There should be a green check mark next to each one of these sections. Then you're done with that section. If you don't, there's something missing in there. There's something that has a red star next to it that you need to fill out for it to show green. Really important part of the Common Application that I really like. If you go to My Colleges, and actually let me back up. In order to add a college, you're going to use the college search button. Okay, this is where you can type in a college and then you would just hit the add button. Okay, so I've already added some colleges in here. So let's say we want to apply to Santa Clara. This is a really helpful page for you to create a spreadsheet because it's going to include all of your deadlines so that I can start to prioritize and say, okay, if I want to do early action to Santa Clara or early decision, that deadline is November 1st, right? And then I know if I'm going to do regular decision, it's only January 7th. So then I can maybe prioritize that. You can start seeing what else they need, right? So letters of recommendation. So for this particular school, and every single school is going to have something different, which is why I think it's really helpful to take a look at this page. So for Santa Clara, they require 1 teacher, but they allow 2 optional. So this one, theoretically, you could have 3 teacher letter of recommendations, and it allows 1 optional. So what the 1 optional would be is like, say it's your boss, a coach, someone that you volunteer that kind of supervises you, something like that. Okay, but that's really important for you to be aware of what they're going to require here. Okay. You're going to see that some of the schools, for example, if I click on Stanford, it looks like there isn't a supplement. Let me see if I can find one that does show that there's a supplement. Of course, that one doesn't. Of course, the ones I'm trying to pull up. Here. Okay, so under Dartmouth, you can see here, it says application, questions, recommenders, review and submit, and then they have writing supplement questions. So what that means is whatever your personal statement is, that's that longer essay that goes to everyone. So let's say I was applying to these 3 colleges, they're going to get that same longer essay I write about my rugby team. However, Dartmouth has additional questions that only go to them. So this is one of their supplement questions, right? So this is the, in short, why Dartmouth? This one wouldn't go to College of Charleston and Bowdoin. This one only goes to them. Now, don't get too excited when you see, for example, oh great, Stanford doesn't have supplements. Not true. So if you click questions, Many of these colleges basically have hidden supplements that they call something else. So for example, Stanford has short questions, if it'll load. So these are their short questions. These are 50-word questions. And then they also have short essays. So they do have supplements, they just call it something different, right? So this is a 250-word essay about reflecting on an idea or experience that you're genuinely excited about learning. So the main thing I want you to be aware of is as you start kind of organizing your essay writing, for example, if you're looking at this, you might say, oh, great, Dartmouth, that's the only supplement I need to do, but not really. You do need to click around and make sure they don't have any additional questions. Like, so see, here's Tufts. They have, I'm gonna scroll down, short answer questions. Okay, so these are their specific supplements. I'm applying to Tufts because this one would only go to them. It doesn't go to any of the other colleges. If there's one really big piece of advice I would give any of the students out there that are working on their application, come up with some sort of a spreadsheet or whiteboard or something where you can have list all the colleges you plan to apply to, the deadlines you plan to apply to, and then what do they require? So do they all require the personal statement? You can kind of check a box there. Do they require a supplement? And what is the supplement? You might kind of write in shorthand, you know, the why us essay, extracurricular essay, faith essay, something like that. So then you start seeing which essays overlap. So if you're doing a USD essay and a Notre Dame essay, and they both ask about your connection to faith and or Pepperdine or something like that, that same essay you could kind of tweak for both of those. So you're not writing multiple essays, but this does require you to be organized about, okay, these are all the essays I need to work on. And then you can kind of prioritize. If you know that the UCs are due November 30th, but you know you have an early action Santa Clara, you might want to push that one up first, okay, so that you kind of get those ones done before the others. Okay, so, and you can find this online, but if you go ahead and look, and this is in the Common App website here, but these are the questions that you can use to prompt the personal statement. Now, remember, the personal statement is the longer essay. It has to be, you know, like longer than 250, no longer than 650. So it does not have to be exactly 650 words. I would say most very good essays are somewhere in that 600 to 650 kind of word limit. You don't have to use the prompts to write. These are simply here if you really have no idea what to write about. I mean, they even give you this last prompt, which is just share an essay of your choice. So really you can write about anything. However, it is really helpful to think about what is the story you want to tell, you really think your application is missing, you know, without you telling that story, whether that is, you know, like here, a background, identity, your interest. Is there something about your experience growing up, like an accomplishment or some academic area that you really love, you really want them to know about? Most students have a lot of stories that they can tell, but we're really thinking about what is the one thing you want them to know about you. It's less about, oh, I should write about the service project I did because they'll like it. So don't focus on what quote unquote they'll like, the admissions officer, because there's really no telling what they'll like. So you really have to focus on what is the story you want to tell, that, you know, kind of the way I explain it is, you know, if you were going on American Idol or one of those kind of singing shows, what is the song you would pick that's going to show off your voice the best? Most singers could sing anything, right? They could sing a country song, they could sing a rock song or whatever, a pop song, but one type of song is going to maybe show off their voice the best. So you might have multiple stories. You could talk about your experience with work, you could talk about rugby, or you could talk about service. One of those is going to be more meaningful to you or can demonstrate parts of your character better than the other ones. Okay. So this webinar was fairly short and sweet, just kind of going over some of the basics of the Common Application. If we don't have any other questions, I might actually end this webinar. So I'm going to give it one more minute just to see if anyone has any additional questions. I will point out that I am still working with a few more seniors on an hourly basis. So if that's something that you need help with, please make sure to reach out to me and schedule some time to chat and see how I can help you with that. Applications are open. It opened August 1st, so please start working on that. But don't rush it. I think it is, I think a lot of students might feel the pressure of, oh my gosh, it's open, I've got to submit it. I would rather have it done with quality and turned in a little bit later than try to rush it and get it in, say, this month. So just make sure you spend time working on these essays, working through your application. This is a really big part of whether or not you're going to be admitted or not. If you're kind of scrambling this off on your phone, you have a lot more chances that things are not going to be, typed in wrong, typed in correctly or something like that. You don't want to be viewed as someone that didn't take this process seriously. So with that in mind, if there are no other questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out if you have other questions. I will send out a recording, so if you missed anything, definitely rewatch that part with me. But thanks so much for spending your evening with me. And I'll probably do another one of these sessions specifically on essays. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned to my newsletters and Facebook page and things like that. Hopefully I will see you soon. Thanks so much.